Welcome to She Rebel Radio, the podcast for high-performing women leaders who want to unlearn conventional rules, leave prestigious careers, and launch businesses of significance. Each week, She Rebel Radio brings you insights and advice from women entrepreneurs who transformed their prestige prisons into daring entrepreneurial success stories. Now, here is your host, Lulu Nins.
Welcome to episode 22 of She Rebel Radio. Our blue space can unlock purpose and possibility with Lizzi from Going Coastal Blue. Lizzi is the founder of Blue Health Coaching. She's an extremely experienced, award-winning coach and coach trainer, hosting experiences and courses in her coastal home in Cornwall. In 2019, Lizzi won the Blue Mind Award for all her work with coaching, but also as a marine medic, charity co-founder of Ghostbusters, whose purpose is collecting and recovering netting from the beaches. And she's also on a relentless mission to clean the beaches and local businesses of plastic. Lizzie's a huge bundle of energy and has her fingers in many amazing pies. It's amazing to have you here. How are you doing today, Lizzi?
Good morning. I'm doing really well. It's a beautiful blue day at the beach, so I'm in a good space. How are you?
Yes, I am good, thank you. And I hear that you've been releasing seals on the beach this morning.
We have, really exciting. So when you've been part of rescuing them, it's really amazing to see them go back out where they belong, out in the ocean. So we saw 6 seals returned to their home this morning, which was beautiful.
Amazing. And just before we dived on, one of them was one of the seals that I was down there in Cornwall with you and saw, in the rescue place, etc. And he's been released today. So I was really excited to hear that.
Yeah, so he's back at home. So I think they found it quite cold and weren't used to the waves. But once they get out there, it's one of those things, isn't it? We think things are going to be really scary. Then once you get into them, not so scary at all. So they swam off. Beautiful metaphor for diving in, really.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I'm excited to dive in today because your purpose just threads through everything you do. So I would love to ask why Blue Space is so important to you and why the She Rebel Radio listeners should be spending more time at the beach.
Okay. So Blue Space is important to all of us, I think, in terms of how we're built. We're built to connect with water, and we're built to connect predominantly with the ocean, being an ocean planet. I think it's important because it enables us to slow down. It's important for life because actually if our oceans aren't clean and healthy, then we aren't, because predominantly everything to do with life revolves around the ocean. So I guess lots of people aren't aware of how much oxygen that we breathe is related to the ocean, and it comes from the ocean. So even if you don't think that you are connected to the sea, actually the fact that you like breathing and living means that the ocean should be really important to you. But Blue Space, full stop. It allows us to slow down, allows us to take stock, and allows us to actually just relax a little bit and get out of that very digital, fast-paced world.
And I love you say that we live on an ocean planet.
Yeah. And it's a reminder that everything is an ecosystem. So the fact that if people are running, if your She Rebel Club are running businesses, every single thing that they do will have an impact upon something else. So the ocean's a really good reminder of the fact that we're not disconnected.
That everything's connected and that cause and effect within the ecosystem. Absolutely. And something that, as you said, to move away from the digital into a more open space. With the digital world rising, is that even more important now than ever, do you think?
I think so. I think we live in a really fast-paced space where information is immediate. We get a lot of information fired at us moment to moment, and everything seems very black and white and finite, as if we need to have closure on every single piece of information that comes to us. Whereas when we go out to a coastal environment, for example, and I champion all blue space, so it could be a lake, a river, a stream, but predominantly I love the ocean and I love the coast. When we go out into that sort of space, what we're reminded of is actually just how non-specific things are. So we get that very analog experience where we get to experience light and shade and colour and form, complexity, simplicity. So all the qualities of an ocean space or a coastal space remind us that actually we live in a world of gradients and not edges. So there are lots and lots of different shades and colours and forms to how we each experience life and decision making. and it's not always an either or type mentality. And when we slow down and start actually exploring what possibilities there are, our decision making becomes very much more coherent and much more connected to the impact that that choice will have.
Absolutely. And when you say coherent, I know what that means, but for our listeners, how would you explain that?
So coherent comes from, you're familiar with it. It comes from the world of being able to really check in with our mind and our body and our ecosystem. So coherence for me is around slowing our breathing, being aware of and connected to our heart rhythm and our body, and what our body is telling us about the experience that we're having, so that we don't just make decisions from the neck up. We make decisions based on our entire nervous system, because our senses are how we meet the world. And that's, again, when you go to the coast, you are bombarded with sensory experience, but in a very, very different way from how you might be in a fast urban commercial type environment. You're bombarded with beauty. And actually that allowing your senses to take that in and allowing yourself to slow your system, slow your breathing, so that you can make a very considered and aware decision about what's important to you.
And do you think we've lived in a society that values making decisions from the neck up?
Yeah, I certainly do. I think a lot of us have gone through quite traditional schooling, which is amazing to see actually that a lot of education is changing. But lots of us have learnt in a way that there are right and wrong answers, and that actually being able to live by structure and grasp for certainty is the way that we achieve success, whatever success is. Whereas actually personal wealth and collective well-being is a very different animal altogether. So learning to tune into the fact that we are animals, we are essentially evolved animals living on this planet, and we're not separate to that environment that we're living within, is almost like it's basically about going back in time to the very essence of what it means to be human.
Yeah, instead of this separation and structure. And I think I said on a previous episode, actually, kind of lawyers, for example, that's my background, kind of growing up with templates. This is how you do it. This is right. This is wrong.
Yeah. And I have no idea how you stayed in that environment for so long, because you are so broad in your thinking. I can imagine that was quite a constraining experience to be having.
Yeah, I think I used the word suffocated by the end of it.
Yeah. It doesn't create room for it doesn't allow room for creativity.
Mm-hmm.
So and actually that's when you stifle creativity, you become very conditioned in the way that you respond to circumstances, and actually that doesn't allow for change. And the world is changing at such a pace.
Yeah.
There's this paradox that we need to slow down to take stock, to ensure that whatever choices we're now making, they are wiser than perhaps some of the solutions that we found in the past.
Yeah, because there's almost this encouragement, even more than ever, isn't there, to make quicker decisions without that checking in.
Yeah, and that's why I'm a Blue health coach, but as an environmental activist, we have made some very quick decisions that have seemed very efficient in the short term, producing things like massive amounts of single-use plastic for convenience. But just because something's convenient doesn't mean that the wider impact of it is going to be good.
Yeah, absolutely. The bigger impact. Now, you mentioned that the ocean is your kind of favourite blue space, but you're an advocate for all blue space. How did your relationship and connection with the ocean and blue space kind of begin?
I think for me, I had a turbulent upbringing. I was very spoilt, but in terms of my parents' relationship, it was fairly turbulent. So going to the beach was like going home. Mm-hmm. So, and I found that when I went to the coast, it was playful and light, but also that it provided peace. So it felt very safe for me to be around the sea. You felt very nurtured when I was in the water.
Yeah.
And it was a place where I felt very connected. So I felt very connected both to the nature, so both to actually the wildlife that I'd see, mm-hmm. whether that was flowers or whether that was marine mammals. I felt very connected to that, as if that was part of me. And it was a really strong formative experience for me to spend so much time at the coast.
Yeah.
And that for me made me recognize, I guess probably unconsciously at that point in time, but that it was a restorative place. It was a place to go and restore and feel that you could regroup, I guess, no matter what was going on around you, what chaos was going on around you. That was a place where actually you could have a sense of yourself, but also have a sense of how you fitted into something wider than yourself.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have put it that way as a child, but that certainly is, on reflection, what spending so much time at the beach did.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't articulate it when you're young, but yeah, and it's kind of lots of paradoxes, but that are so complementary to one another and essential for our nature.
Yeah, and risk. I remember, because it was Atlantic Ocean, so it's the Seven Bays area of Cornwall that I spent a lot of my childhood, and it's actually really dangerous. There's really strong currents there. Right. So it's really dangerous to swim there. But actually, being able to experience a little bit of risk at an early age gives you skills to then be able to experience more significant risk later on.
Yeah.
So there was a sense of learning and play in that space as well. So I think the coast has always offered that, and it's always offered that sense of being aware of being connected.
Yeah, I love that. And as you know, I grew up in Brighton, and we don't have the sand. We've got the amazing pebbles here, but that kind of excitement, we used to kind of dodge the waves as kids. And there is that calmness, as you say, but then that playfulness and that risk and, screaming and having that sense of adventure and creativity.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can have solitude. So it's something that we've talked about since being a child, the sense of solitude being where you've got plenty of space, and you feel that you've got space to contemplate, but actually you don't feel isolated when you're at the beach. Maybe something to do with the horizon, maybe to do with the sense of the amount of life that's going on around you, or under the surface of the waves, or even in the sand or in the sand dunes. You don't feel that you're isolated, but you can get a sense of solitude, and that allows you to reflect.
Yeah, and that connectedness. And I know I was talking to a friend about this at the weekend, actually. I think she was listening to a podcast about loneliness, etc. And there is a lot of loneliness in the digital world. But actually getting out to the beach, as you say, you can have that solitude, but you feel super connected and not isolated, there's a massive difference.
Yeah, and I just love looking around. I don't know about you, but I love looking around the beach and you see families making their memories. So they probably won't have an old-fashioned type of photo album that I might have had when I grew up, where they look back at these photographs. But those images, those snapshots in time, are going to imprint on the minds of those families. So you see so much more play. It's random. It's the fact that people who might ordinarily go to work wearing a suit choose to come to the beach for a holiday. They come to essentially sit in a pile of dirt digging by water. That's what people choose to do for their recreation, is shows that there is something primal about wanting to connect with that sense of edge, that sense of not being crowded in the big sky that you get at the beach, and actually just to feel the soil, feel the sand beneath your hands, and connect with something very, very simple.
Definitely. I think I'm probably a bit selfish with my beach, because it used to be super quiet and now it's got quite busy where I live, because I'm outside Brighton. I'm a bit like, this is my place of solitude. But one thing I do love as well, especially because it's quite natural, the beach where I'm at, there's lots of plants as well. So you can really tell what season you're in, because it's either in full bloom or it's all dying away. And that kind of really allows me to connect with where I'm at within my season, if you like, in terms of business and ideas and all of that stuff. So I love that about the beach where I live.
Yeah. And sand dunes here, you have loads of wildflowers, you have butterflies through the summer. I keep bees mainly because, again, it's about recognizing the ecosystem we're in, and you can actually smell what's going into the honey based on the pollen. So that it's a real sensory experience as well. So, but certainly the seasons, I woke up this morning to frost on the beach, and it's actually really beautiful. It creates a real stillness.
Yeah.
So there's something around a frosty morning that dampens sound and just creates a sense of stillness.
Yeah, and a real kind of freshness as well. So when did the ocean and Blue Mind become part of your purpose?
So I guess there's two pieces to that. So the ocean became part of my purpose around my 20s. So I joined Surfers Against Sewage as a member of them and became quite heavily engaged with ocean activism. So I enjoyed surfing. So I was seeing pollution out in the water, not so much plastic pollution, but pollution from our sewage systems. So actually the ocean became a really big part of who I was in terms of how I showed up. So that became part of my own purpose. In terms of my work purpose, back in 2009, I started my business. And I knew that when I'd been working up in the city and driving home, it would be a case of driving home from a week staying away. And I would do that big sigh, that big exhale. Yeah. That we do when we come over the horizon, you see the sea. Mm-hmm. And it was just a case of, okay, I'm home, and everything would dial down out of the chaos. So I knew that bringing people to that space would be really restorative. And I also knew that from my perspective, I wanted people to get out in that space, enjoy and get the benefits from it, but also see the sense of how important it was to look after that space. Yeah. So it became a covert mission, I guess, that everybody that spent time at the beach would also grow to love that space. And therefore, I might pick up some litter. I still, I pick up litter every time I'm out on the beach. But if I'm coaching somebody and we see marine litter, I will pick up a few pieces. And that's partly because it's part of what's important to me, but it's also part of putting it into people's conscious awareness that marine litter is an example of the footprint that we're leaving on the planet. So it's a great, so I use it as a tool, as a metaphor for people in terms of what choices are they making. So it became part of my purpose more overtly in terms of the professional side of things when I set up my business in 2009. And then Blue Mind connected with Wallace J. Nichols, who wrote the book Blue Mind. It's a beautiful book that brings together some of the neuroscience of blue space back in 2014. Yeah. So our paths kind of converged because kind of the work that he was doing really, really related to what I was doing coaching at the beach. So I became an advocate for Blue Mind and Blue Health. So Blue Health is the science of blue space. So there's a lot of research since 2014 as well into the world of, well, what is it that the coast is doing for us? What is it that water does for us? And why is it so important to our health and well-being?
And you won an award with Blue Mind. Was that this year or was it last year?
That was this year, 2019. So we won my husband and I both, Julian and I both won the Blue Mind Award, it was the 6th Blue Mind Award, basically for living blue. So it was a reflection of the fact that my business is very focused on looking after the ocean and allowing people to, in their business, connect with what's important to them. So it's not, I don't only coach people who are ocean advocates in terms, it's not only the marine based people, but actually working with people in terms of recognizing an ecosystem. But it was also a reflection of some of the charity work that we do, because if anybody signs up to be a Blue Health coach, there's an ethical code that basically asks that they give a third of their time back to marine conservation causes or water causes. So it can be that they're helping provide wells in countries where free-flowing water isn't available, something that's about protecting water, basically.
Amazing. And why did you create Blue Health Coaching?
So predominantly because I've been coaching at the beach for 10 years. So actually in January, I go back to, it'll be the 11th year, start of the 11th year.
Congratulations.
Thanks. And there's so many things so many tools that have emerged over the last 10, 11 years that, because I spend so much time on the coast, you can take for granted. So things that I might become familiar with around the way that people walk on sand and what that does for our vestibular system and how that impacts our ability to think creatively. Lots of the neuroscience around blue space is sharing some of the science so that we can more consciously as coaches use that awareness with our clients to help them be creative and to help them find what's important to them and also make choices that are ecologically wise. So it's around sharing tools and techniques and approaches. Anybody that takes anybody out onto the beach, out into blue space to coach them rather than sitting in a very cluttered office is going to have a really good result, a better result than sitting in an office that's taking too much conscious attention. Mm-hmm. But in terms of actually modeling and extracting what's the magic, that's what I've been working with Blue Health in terms of being able to share some of the tools and approaches that I've developed so that other coaches can use those more consciously.
Yeah.
Rather than by fluke gaining a benefit. Of course, you'll gain a benefit from being in blue space because it naturally impacts our health and well-being. But I wanted to share some of the approaches that will kind of ramp that up.
Absolutely. And then your purpose is massively tied within that as well, with the ethical code that is part of that program.
Yeah, and yeah, the ethical code is about basically protecting the planet. So if those coaches are working with any businesses or any individuals and enabling those individuals to make choices where environment and social benefit is part of their decision making, then that creates a wider ripple effect of a progressive action rather than those sort of efficient moment to moment me and my type decisions. Actually, it becomes much more about collective wisdom.
Yeah, absolutely. And that collective movement for sure.
And there's so much science. Yeah, there's so much science out there, and we know that when we look at Horizon, it feels relaxing, but actually being able to explore and share what is it about that soft fascination that's making a difference for the way that person's brain and body are responding.
And is there anything you want to share about that? Why it is?
That's kind of one example. There's so many examples, but that's one example. So, directed attention. So directed attention is shown to create fatigue. So it's one of the reasons that when we're looking at screens moment to moment and just getting too much information coming in, we frown, we don't breathe particularly well. So our body is not getting oxygenated as perhaps it might be if we are looking up and out and expanding our vision. So soft fascination, and when we take ourselves into much more of that peripheral space, the whole of the way that we use our body alters. So we breathe differently, our heart rhythm's different. We're actually recognizing that we can connect with the whole of our nervous system to make a decision. So that actually we get into much more of a creative space, and that's one of the core elements of mindfulness, and why mindfulness has become much less fringe is because soft fascination enables us to get into a mind. And we had this conversation, I think it was you and I, Lulu, about mindfulness versus mind emptiness. We want to be empty in our mind rather than full. but
yeah, definitely. Don't like the term, but
yeah. But that's one tiny element of how an ocean space basically automatically provides that for us without us having to sit and say, well, now we're going to do our mindfulness. Now we're going to soften our vision. Actually, when you go and sit and look at the waves, and you notice that there's variance within a wave pattern. Waves come in, and there's sameness because they're all coming vaguely in one direction, but there's just enough difference to create a soft fascination within us that holds our attention.
Yeah,
but it's not holding our attention in a way that we're having to be highly efforted.
It comes with the ease for sure.
So it slows us down, and it's that enables us to think in a different way. And there's so much information out there in terms of the science of blue space that blue health coaches don't have to be scientists, and it's not just about the theory. It's actually about, okay, so that's really interesting, but so what does that mean when it comes to us being coaches taking people outside? How can we have a really light touch, but a light touch that comes from awareness, so that we are aware of how we're interacting with our environment? It becomes our business partner, really.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to have that, almost understanding, as for me, living by the beach, when I was practicing in legal practice, I didn't have any time, even though I'm one street away, it takes me like 5 minutes. I didn't have any time to be down the beach. So when I left and suddenly found myself with all this expansive time, I spent so much time, and still do, down the beach. But particularly when I call it like my recovery process was, really connecting with myself, the bigger picture, and as we say, like kind of emptying the mind and connecting back with creativity, which had kind of been templated and structured out of me at that time.
Yeah, and it's so beautiful because you'll have your space within your beach that's really special. So you'll have that sense of place, and that's human geography. That's recognizing the difference between a space and a place, and that's so blue health coaching comes from so many different angles. It might be it's elements of neuroscience, but it's also human geography. It's also social sciences. It's also mindfulness and esoteric practice. So it's this very, very eclectic mix that actually then uses storytelling out on the beach. So you'll have your own stories, for example, of being out on your beach. That's part of your story in terms of your story of your recovery. Is your recovery from escaping this old world of how you worked. That becomes part of your narrative, and the beach becomes part intertwined within that.
Yeah, and it's even actually in my last year of practice, they opened a new cafe on the pier down in Worthing, and I would escape to the end of the pier where no one could call me because there was no reception, and be surrounded by water there. But again, the narrative at the time, I didn't know why that was my pull, that's where I needed to go to feel myself.
Which is and that's beautiful. And I love NLP, so I love language as well. So the landscape metaphor can be so playful. And some people will use landscape metaphor to be able to work through really tricky stuff where they are in that transition period. But actually, we can use the landscape to create ideas and possibilities about where we want to take our world. So it becomes that we can reflect back, but also we can then actually use the landscape to help bring ideas to life, if you like.
Yeah, and I was going to say is how does We've touched on some science parts already, but in terms of people and women in particular who are the listeners of She Rebel Radio, but those who are leaving those prestigious positions, how can they connect and use Blue Space to connect with their purpose? Because I know for me, it was that real, but what am I supposed to do next? How can Blue Space help us to connect with that?
So I think there's loads of ways. So if people can't get to out to natural blue space, there's urban blue. So you can go into your city and you can sit by a waterfall and actually just allow yourself to be held by the soundscape that creates. And that creates a very safe space for you to then create some dreams. You could go to a float tank, which allows you to actually let go of all the old stuff. So if you've ever been to a flotation tank, actually floating is a really, really good way of resetting and starting from scratch, because in a float tank we don't really know where we end and the world begins, because everything around us is the same temperature. We're completely buoyant. Most of our brain gets a chance to actually switch off, and actually all there is your heartbeat and your breath. So if you start from your heartbeat and your breath, it allows you to then start to think, okay, so from that place, what might my purpose be? Why might I actually be here? How is it that I exist, and what's important here? So that's quite a good way. In terms of the landscape metaphor piece around purpose, is go for a walk and explore the concept of time, for example, and what time means to you and what time could mean to you, because they're the sorts of philosophical discussions that I end up having on the beach. It's not your standard GROW model of goal, reality, options, will and wrap up, let's fill in some boxes. It's you're here for X amount of time, and it's certainly not the piece of make the most of it, let's ram in as much stuff as possible. But actually, if you were to have a life well lived, if you were to create some sense of quality and meaning wrapped within this space of the landscape, in order to facilitate those thoughts, what might that be? What's really important to you? So getting out in blue space, I think, is fundamental for our health and well-being. Whether that is ocean or whether that's urban space. I mean, I was training over in the Marine Aquarium earlier this week in Plymouth, and that's virtual blue space. That's not proper blue space as I might describe it, but it's virtual blue space. And I was within the ocean city, which is Plymouth is the ocean city, but actually in a building, looking at marine life, which generally I wouldn't be particularly focused on marine life that's in captivity, but actually they're pretty good. They're a pretty good aquarium. But actually that's blue space. So if that's what is provided for somebody as their blue space, go and sit and look at the tanks and explore the concept of an ecosystem and how healthy your ecosystem is right now for you. Where are you placing your attention at the moment? Which aspects of your ecosystem are moving faster or slower? So that's, I was watching one of the tanks, and it was amazing just to watch how the different marine life moves.
Yeah.
And when things change direction, and what is it that causes something to change direction? And is there anything going on in your world that you might like to change direction or place different attention upon? So it's using blue environments to ask those sorts of questions in order to really create an aligned purpose in terms of what's really important.
Yeah, and I love the question of just even going into a blue space and asking what your purpose is today. If the bigger picture is too overwhelming, quite often which I'm going to have a walk along the beach today, something will just pop in out of nowhere. Oh, I really need to connect with that today or to do that today instead of, as you say, sitting by a computer screen. Another thing that popped to mind as well, not only actually in my last year of practice as well, I went to spas all the time as well. That was like part of my movement of it was somewhere I could really found that I could relax and think about the bigger picture.
Spas are great. I spoke at Spa Fest a couple of months ago.
Oh yeah.
And we were exploring, spas. One of the main ways that lots of people connect with water is through spas.
Mm-hmm.
Now, ideally, natural water is going to be very different from a chlorinated space, but lots of spas are now looking at how they can create, saltwater experiences. And spas do enable us to have that immersive experience of being in water if natural water isn't available to us.
Yeah.
And they have a soundscape. And you look around a spa, I suspect lots of the artwork in the spa will be blue space orientated. Mm-hmm. So it's in the artwork, it might be in the music that you're listening to, like it is that the lyrics in the music that you're listening to in the background music in a spa will be very water based. So water is around us all the time. Nobody questions the randomness of going into a dentist's, for example, and why do they have a fish tank? Why does a dentist have a fish tank? That doesn't make any sense logically.
No.
But in terms of intuitively, of course it does, because when we look at a fish tank, it relaxes us because for all sorts of reasons. Spas are another really great way of connecting with water. The buoyancy that we feel when we're in the water, for example.
Mm. Although you're sending my mind into crazy, it's like, why do they have fish tanks in Chinese restaurants?
Exactly. It's bizarre. Water metaphor, but also the symbolism of water is ubiquitous. It's all around us, and it's really from a blue mind perspective, as a blue mind advocate, because blue mind is a movement around protect what you love, and it's around really as a movement. We like to really get people to appreciate water, and actually, water is undervalued and underutilized as a health and well-being resource. So by creating a movement of blue health coaches, we raise water right up to the top of people's conscious awareness.
Yeah, totally. And as you know, a lot of my coaching, a Riyadh with a pool in the middle of Morocco, a yoga retreat in Goa on the beach.
You so are. Yeah, you're it. That's why we connected in the first place, wasn't it? Around water and yoga, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And I was going to say, when you get so clear about your purpose and you are so clear and it runs through, or ripples through, to use that word, there's a thread in everything that you do. It actually makes it easier for people to find you. Like I wouldn't have found you as a trainer for me, were you not, kind of advocating for what it is that you stand for, that I was like, yes, I connect with this person because of all of these things, because of water, because of yoga, because of cats. That's another one.
Yes. Yeah. Cats as well. I mean, that's I love your language. It runs through, it flows through. And that's even in our language, when we're in flow, when things, ideas are coming out of the blue, all of our language that tends to be positive language, or a lot of our language that tends to be positive language, is about flow.
Yeah.
And the ripple effect. So being able to express ourselves in very fluid terms. I find it, the fact that we are more liquid than we are solid is fascinating to me. The fact that we think we get stuck. It's like, realistically, we are more liquid than we are solid. Our bodies are a higher proportion of water than anything else. Like that's amazing.
Although when you said that, I kind of had a vision of the Terminator, and who else? Might have to watch that.
Imagine if we could allow our ideas to be that fluid.
Yeah, instead of feeling like they're stagnant and stagnating.
And I think the biggest thing that the beach lends is the fact that it is a space of continual transition.
Mm-hmm.
So that on the shoreline, everything is changing, moment to moment, second to second. Every piece of sand is being shifted. There is movement. There's that lack of being static, and that immersing yourself in that sort of space helps us come to terms with the fact that change is something that is constant.
So what is next for you and Blue Health Coaching? I know you have a training coming up, so we'd love to hear about that.
Thanks, Lulu. Yes, I do. I have training coming up in February. So February the 17th to the 20th, I'm training a group of Blue Health coaches, and that will be the first of that program with an aim to building a movement of Blue Health coaches. I'm doing a lot of speaking at the moment on the topic of Blue Health and applied Blue Health. So lots of conferences, various press around Blue Health and how do we apply Blue Health into our day-to-day lifestyles, whether that's in an urban setting or whether that is coastal. So and that's about promoting a bluer lifestyle.
Yep. And
nature is medicine. So the broader nature is medicine, but particularly connecting with water for ocean health. In terms of, we've got these sustainable development goals with the UN, and goal 14 is all about healthy oceans. And so therefore the ocean is so fundamental to our health as from a civilization perspective, for us thriving. My role ongoing is championing water and healthy water, but actually all that gives us in terms of all the lessons that gives us in terms of how we live our lives. So like I said, I don't only coach people who work in the marine environment. It is about being really mindful of the ecosystem that we experience life in. So there's that. And then there's just more charity stuff, more working with reducing ghost fishing nets, more working with rescuing seals, more working with keeping our beaches clean and educating our schools around Surfers Against Sewage messages of marine protected environment areas, and reducing plastics and pollution.
So inspirational and purposeful, and so much energy for everything that you do. Where is the best place that people can find you as well?
So if people want to connect, they can connect via you, because we're really connected, but they can connect also via Going Coastal Blue, which is my website. On Twitter, I'm Lizzi L. I'm also on Instagram, also on Facebook, but Going Coastal Blue is the main place to connect from a Blue Health perspective.
Yeah, and we will post in the show notes all the links to all the other amazing work that you're doing as well.
Brilliant. Yeah, any of the charities, please do post those, because they can definitely do with your support and help.
Absolutely. Amazing to have you. Have an amazing rest of the day and enjoy some more blue space. I certainly know I will be.
Thank you for inviting me on. Lovely to chat with you as always.
Speak soon.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to She Rebel Radio, the podcast for high-performing women leaders who want to unlearn conventional rules, leave prestigious careers, and launch businesses of significance. She Rebel Radio is executive produced and hosted by women's advocate and coach Lulu Mins. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe so you never miss another episode. You can find Lulu Mins on Facebook and LinkedIn at Lulu Mins, and on Instagram at LuluMins_biz. Until next week, keep rebelling against the rules and designing success your way.